It was supposed to be an ordinary block of cheddar cheese, sold in American stores, eaten at family dinner tables, and trusted completely. By the time anyone realized what was inside it, 4 people were already dead. To understand how a block of cheese became a public health disaster, you have to understand what America looked like in 1928. The country was riding the economic confidence of the Roaring '20s. Refrigerators were becoming more common in middle-class homes. Food was being industrialized and commercialized at a pace that had never been seen before, and Americans were beginning to trust factory-made food products in a way that felt entirely new. If it was sold in a grocery store, it was assumed to be safe. That assumption was about to be tested. Food safety regulation in 1928 was almost non-existent by today's standards. Pasteurization, the process of heating milk to kill dangerous bacteria, had been scientifically understood and championed for decades. And yet a significant portion of commercially manufactured cheese in the United States was still being produced from raw, unpasteurized milk. Nobody in the industry thought much about it. Cheese had been made from raw milk for literally thousands of years. It had been aged, it had been eaten, and for the most part, people had been fine. Why would now be any different? Cheddar cheese in particular was a cornerstone of the American diet. Affordable, widely available, and produced in enormous quantities across the northeastern United States. The aging process, storing wheels and blocks in cool, dark rooms for weeks or months, was considered the standard safeguard. It had always been enough. Cheesemakers had been doing it this way for generations, and the cheese came out fine, until one batch didn't. In 1928, a cluster of people across a region of the United States began falling seriously ill. The symptoms followed a distinct and alarming pattern: high sustained fever that lasted for days, severe cramping and abdominal pain, profound exhaustion that left patients barely able to move. Trained physicians who examined these patients recognized the presentation immediately. This was typhoid fever, and there were enough cases appearing in enough connected locations that public health officials knew they were dealing with a common source. Typhoid fever is caused by the bacterium Salmonella typhi, a pathogen that enters the body through contaminated food or water and launches a sustained attack on the digestive system. In 1928, before the widespread availability of antibiotics, a confirmed typhoid diagnosis was a genuinely frightening event for any family. Patients faced weeks of severe illness, and in the worst cases, the infection progressed to internal complications that could prove fatal. There was no quick fix. You waited, you fought, and you hoped. Making the situation worse was the nature of typhoid transmission. Even people who recovered from the illness could continue to carry Salmonella typhi silently in their systems for years afterward, shedding the bacteria and potentially passing the disease to others without ever feeling sick again. This was a disease that could spread quietly through a community long after the initial outbreak had supposedly been contained. Public health investigators understood the urgency. They needed to find the source, and they needed to find it fast. Investigators began interviewing every single patient, tracking their daily routines, their movements, and most critically, everything they had eaten in the days before falling ill. It was slow, painstaking work, but patterns began to emerge. One food item appeared on the lists of patient after patient, household after household. Commercially manufactured cheddar cheese, made from unpasteurized raw milk and distributed through standard American grocery channels. That was the source. If this story is pulling you in, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. There is a lot more American food history coming to this channel, and the stories only get more surprising from here. Don't miss the next one. The confirmed case count reached 29 individuals sickened by the contaminated cheddar. 4 of them did not survive. 4 families lost someone to a block of cheese purchased from a neighborhood grocery store. In a country that had been confidently embracing the rise of the industrialized food supply, this was a jarring and very public failure. Newspapers carried the story. Public health officials faced intense pressure, and the question being asked at every level was the same: how had this been allowed to happen? What the scientific investigation uncovered next was the finding that would permanently change American food policy. Researchers testing the contaminated cheese discovered something that no one in the industry had fully reckoned with. Salmonella typhi bacteria could survive, alive and fully active, inside cheddar cheese for approximately 63 days. Not weakened, not declining, surviving. The cool, dense, fatty interior of an aging cheddar block was not neutralizing the bacteria. In critical ways, it was sheltering them. This finding overturned a core assumption that the entire industry had operated on for generations. The traditional aging period, the weeks and months that cheese spent in a cool cellar before reaching the market, had always been treated as a passive safety mechanism. Time plus cool temperatures was supposed to be enough. The 63-day survival data proved conclusively that this assumption was wrong. In some cases, those aging rooms were not killing the bacteria. They were simply giving them somewhere quiet to wait. In the years following this outbreak, combined with evidence gathered from additional incidents, the United States government moved to address the problem with a concrete, regulatory response. The result was a rule that remains federal law in the United States to this day. Any cheese made from raw, unpasteurized milk must be aged for a minimum of 60 days at a temperature of no less than 35 degrees Fahrenheit before it can legally be sold to the public. The logic was direct. If bacteria could survive 63 days, then 60 days of mandatory aging at controlled temperature represented the critical safety threshold. This became known informally as the 60-day rule, and it is still the law in the United States today. Every artisan cheesemaker who ages a raw milk cheddar, every farmstead producer carefully turning wheels in a cave cellar, every specialty cheese shop that stocks unpasteurized aged varieties, all of them are operating under a regulation that traces its origins directly to a contaminated block of cheddar from 1928. A single outbreak became the invisible backbone of an entire industry's safety framework. And almost nobody knows where that rule actually came from. 4 lives lost. 29 families devastated by a disease that should never have been allowed to reach their dinner tables. And out of that tragedy came a regulatory framework that has quietly protected American consumers for nearly a century. The 1928 outbreak rarely appears in mainstream history books. It doesn't come up in school curricula or documentary series, but its consequences are embedded in the food system you interact with every single time you pick a block of aged raw milk cheese at a specialty counter. That small label telling you the cheese has been aged 60 days or more, that is the fingerprint of 1928. That is the legacy of 4 people who didn't make it home. Let's bring this all the way home. In 1928, contaminated cheddar cheese made from unpasteurized raw milk triggered a typhoid fever outbreak that put 29 people in hospital beds and took 4 lives. Scientific investigation revealed that Salmonella typhi bacteria could survive active inside cheddar for 63 days, completely dismantling the industry's assumption that natural aging was a sufficient safety barrier. That discovery drove the creation of the 60-day raw milk cheese aging rule that still governs American cheesemakers today. One disaster, one scientific finding, a century of food policy built on top of it. If you made it to the end of this, thank you. This is exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell. If it surprised you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps. Subscribe so you catch the next deep dive, and leave me a comment below. Did you already know about the 60-day rule before watching this? I see every single one.